Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Two Baller Bill, formerly known as Robert Paul Johnson, and we are the Last Nighters. You can find us on the Liberty Movement's YouTube channel. I will find the link for that and put it on our show notes page at lastnighters.com/155. And we're here to spread a little Christmas cheer. And we bring our friend Mike C. from up north as we review the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, because nothing says Christmas like a movie where Legolas saves the people of Jerusalem in the Battle of Helm's Deep 2. So welcome, Mike. How are things going with you, and how are things up in Canada?
Oh, Canada. Yeah, it's not so bad. I'm emotionally threadbare, pretty excitable these days, but for the most part, just kind of focusing on my propaganda and not getting in fights with strangers. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're supposed to fight with each other a lot, and that's sort of been a long game of the state. But I don't know. I'm pretty calm, a lot calmer than a lot of people I talk to, I guess, in answer to your question.
Well, that's good. That's good. And you've been in the pre-show, we were talking about some of the things you've been working on, stressing yourself out, perhaps. And you are working on a new album under your Mechanical Dream Revolution musical venture. And you might have a Christmas gift that you can share with our audience, and that is one of your new tracks from the album. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, I sent you the link. It's all mastered and ready to go. It's episode 5 of a 13-episode season. These episodes, as I call them, are sets of like an hour long music, sometimes more, generally. So, yeah, I mean, that's it. That's my gift to you. It's also my gift to me to promote my shit. So, I don't make money off it or anything. People tell me I should set up like a Patreon or some stuff, but I've been just kind of focusing on trying to get a message that I believe in out before any kind of popularity, I guess, because I feel like they tend to run interference on stuff that if you use copyrighted material and things like that, they've got a lot of tricks up their sleeves. So I've just kind of been focusing on this particular thing. So I mean, that's kind of you guys are kind of on board with a man focusing on a task, trying to get the fruit afterwards.
Yeah, we've talked about that a time or two. Now, is the album art behind you, that is the song that you've released or are releasing?
Yeah, that's The Last Jedi. Or sorry, that's the Last Starfighter. So I don't know. You can kind of see part of it. I can actually send you the picture if you want to post that as well.
Okay, yeah, we will.
So does it include clips from the classic film, or is this just some of the
from Star? I don't actually include the Last Starfighter in that at all. Kind of a dick move, really. But there's a lot of stuff about Star Wars and my love of Star Wars. So I don't really touch Star Wars at all in my music. I just kind of did this one time. I did one piece a while ago, like in 2014, maybe. Or it might have been right after. No, it wouldn't have been after Last Jedi. Anyway, so I did this piece, and it's got a lot of stuff about sort of cowboys and Star Wars and just narrative. And I don't know. You kind of have to listen to it. I don't know. Dan tried to describe it a couple of times, and it doesn't really work. Pretty much just send somebody a link and say, "Listen to this for 10 minutes, and if you like it, keep listening."
Yeah, because it goes for another hour and a half.
Yeah, but it's good. I think it's very good. Like, this is people keep telling me this is my best sort of work, and it's 15 hours of shit to listen to if you want to. It covers the medium of exchange and the medium of expression being controlled by sort of conglomerated power structures. Our currency is controlled, our means of talking to each other is controlled, our narrative is curated and put towards certain things. They tend to destroy our stories or make us pay for them while destroying them. I cover a lot of, just sort of the full spectrum of what's going on now, the Marxist infiltration in the 30s, stuff like that. Bit of Jesus Christ in there in the end too, as an extension of Platonistic thinking and the foundational philosophies of Western culture and what is essentially the center of liberty for the planet, right? Like we sort of came up with this.
Robert. It's good driving music. So If you come back and visit, you can give it a listen. But we'll have that on the show notes page, lastnighters.com/155. And you can get our pre-show and post-show bonus content at lastnighters.com/Patreon. And let's kick this off with the Google description, which is how we start these off. So, Kingdom of Heaven came out in, says here, 2005. It's a war/adventure film. The director's cut is 3 hours and 14 minutes. Got 7.2 out of 10 on IMDb, 39% Rotten Tomatoes, 63% Metacritic. However, 90% of Google users like it. The description reads, still in grief over his wife's sudden death, village blacksmith Balian, played by Orlando Bloom, joins his long-estranged father, Baron Godfrey, Liam Neeson, as a crusader on the road to Jerusalem. After a perilous journey to the holy city, the valiant young man enters the retinue of the leprous King Baldwin IV, played by Edward Norton, which is rife with dissent led by the treacherous Guy de Lusignan, Marton Socas, who wishes to wage war against the Muslims for his own political and personal gain. Release date May 6, 2005. Directors Ridley Scott, budget $135 million, and worldwide box office of $218.1 million. And they butchered this thing when it went out to theaters. They cut it about 45 minutes or so. So around Christmas that year, 2005, I believe that's when the director's cut version came out. And there's even a Village Roadshow version that has a musical interlude to open, like an overture to open it, and then an intermission with another little musical, like 1 minute orchestration before you get into the second half of the film. So, Robert, let's get your take on the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven by the great Ridley Scott.
So, from the man that brought us the Gladiator, brings us another historical epic. I guess you would have to compare the two, and for my money, Gladiator still wins it, simply because the revenge story is actually very palpable in Gladiator. In this movie, the main character is just sort of seeking redemption, seeking to gain a connection to God. We're not exactly sure what he wants and what it would look like if he got what he wanted. Let's put it that way. Like, is he staring at a sunset? Is he having a vision? Is he gonna, I don't know, see a child smile and then he's fulfilled? It's not clear from a plot point, from an audience perspective. Like in Gladiator, you knew Russell Crowe needed to have some kind of revenge against Rome, right? Against Caesar. But in this movie, his wife's dead from suicide, and he's got to just find a new life. So from my perspective, I didn't really latch onto his story as much. Like, I wasn't like behind him, like, yeah, man, you go to Jerusalem and you do the whatever thing that you think you need to do, whatever that is. I mean, it's just not clear. So you can't really, from an audience perspective, you can't really just like get behind him and like, yeah, I'm with this guy. I guess you could, but his motivation didn't engage me. Now, I will say, though, that this movie is very entertaining, and it's helped along by some really gorgeous scenery, and the acting was quite good with a very talented cast. And one of my favorite things was having watched Game of Thrones season 8, where they fucked the dog on tactics, especially in the Battle of Winterfell, but pretty much the entire season was just shithouse garbage for any kind of tactical consideration, where anybody was even thinking in the slightest bit about how two giant armies would face each other with even like one brain cell on either side. Like, what would we do? Where would we put our cavalry? Where would we put our artillery? Where, what kind of skirmishes would we launch? What's our strategy for scaling walls? How would you defend against people scaling walls and all these kinds of things that are super well thought out. Like there's hundreds of thousands of years of medieval siege warfare to draw upon. So people in this time really had it pretty much figured out. Like the movie kind of gives the blacksmith like this kind of new idea-y kind of guy, but it's not really clear that he's like this new engineering dude. Like it's not really presented that way. He's a blacksmith and he's got some ideas, but it's not like, hey, I'm a genius siege defender guy and we're gonna build this thing that's gonna protect us against whatever is being thrown against us. But they end up doing some of that, and I was all for it. I was all engaged in, okay, you're against an overwhelming force. What are you going to do? You have the defensive position, and there is some talk about, fighting away from water, which I really appreciated as a fan of Sun Tzu and the art of war. Considering where you fight and getting your opponent to fight on your terms is super duper duper important. And my big issue with the movie, aside from what I've said so far, is just the cartoonness of the main villain characters. They seem to have very little motivation other than, I'm evil and I want power. And it doesn't, what they did, power to get power, to maintain power, didn't make sense to me. Like, I'm going to go poke the tail of the dragon and inspire this massive army to attack me because I just want to have a fight. I want to be in an army. I want to, what? You're going to go out there and you're going to get slaughtered by an overwhelming superior force. It didn't make sense to me what the villains' plans were or what they wanted and how the plot, what they did within the story to get those ends. Like at one point, the commander of the army turns into the king, but his first act is to be like, all right, let's go fight and get slaughtered out in the desert. What were you trying to do? What were you trying to achieve? What did you want? I didn't, none of that made sense to me, but I did like Orlando Bloom as an actor. I liked the overall story for the most part. I like that he was more concerned about the people. That was, I think that, I don't know if it necessarily rang true in terms of like inspiring people. Like usually they point to something outside of themselves, something beyond themselves to inspire people. But he was very much, no, we're doing this for all these people. This is what I give a shit about. I don't care about some cause, some ethereal God being, all this stuff. I care about these living, breathing people, which from my perspective as a voluntarist, humanist type person, I very much appreciated. So that's a whole lot. I just spewed a whole bunch. I don't know where you guys want to take it from there, but I'm sure you probably had things to say in the middle of that or anywhere. And now who knows what you're going to say, but that's my initial take on this film. Very, very good, but not perfect.
All right. Yeah, there was a lot to talk about, and I had muted myself to prevent myself from butting in because I noticed that I do that occasionally. But yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying makes sense. It is a beautiful film. I think that it has some pretty, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of those moving parts have gotten removed from the theatrical version. And with Ridley Scott putting them back in, a lot of it makes more sense than how audiences might have viewed this in theaters. The whole element of the son of the Princess of Jerusalem or Queen of Jerusalem, the what's her name? Eva Green. Sybil, is that her name?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So in the theatrical cut, the kid's not even in it at all. But in this one, there's a big motivator because he was the heir to Baldwin, Edward Norton's character, and he had the same affliction. And so she was motivated by that to basically shield him from the misery that she knew was coming. I guess Baldwin, he seemed pretty wise for his years, but he died at the age of like 23 or 24 of the leprosy. And I mean, that's pretty amazing that somebody of that age. Now, granted, we've talked about this in the past, Robert, where...
No, wait a minute. He died at 23, 24 in real life or in this movie? Because in this movie, he seemed like he was like 30.
He said he wouldn't live to see 30.
Right, so he was like 28, 29.
Well,
how old was Alexander when he almost conquered the known world?
Alexander was like 23, 24, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just the thing is we're all a bunch of pussies now, basically.
Yeah.
We just become fat, lazy assholes and do nothing with our lives. These guys are fucking the whole world.
But Baldwin did die.
Don is a pussy waiting to get fucked. What?
He did die in real life at age 23 or 24, or something like that.
Okay.
As long as it's a prime number, I'm happy. Okay, I don't know. Like did you see the theatrical release? I
did not see the theatrical, but I did see Ridley Scott's opening to it, and he said that he highlighted some scenes that some plot lines that he brought back in.
Yeah, well, we can all...
They massacred the movie by removing these very...
yeah, they're essential. I mean, you can cut it. You can cut it the way you can cut Fortinbras from Hamlet if you want to. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's preposterous, really. I mean, and I think at that point, Ridley Scott had earned the right to succeed or fail on his own merit. I didn't think the studio should be fucking with him at that point. Like after the sort of comeback of Blade Runner over the years, and then Gladiator, and then I mean, think after this one he did. He had already done Black Hawk Down as well, right? If you're into some, war hawking and stuff. But
yeah.
In answer to your question about the motivations of the bad guys, they're warmongers, and they're not really offering any. Like they liked killing. They could, and there are people that like that. But I think the whole idea is about good leadership and bad leadership and totalitarianist leadership and the leadership of like the spiritual. So like I wrote down leadership is spiritual, not total, is kind of the thesis of the film, is what I got out of it, and how that correlates to the difference between religious structure and God. Sort of the path of Christ and the philosophy of Christ versus what the church does with it, right? Stuff like that, and rules and how rules exist, but really they're only defended by people with swords. So it's really just about the decisions that men with swords make in given situations, right? And they said it over and over. Like he's talking about, like your actions in the moment. Like Edward Norton sits him down and says, like, when you're up there facing judgment, like you won't be able to say, oh, I didn't know, or somebody told me to do it this way and I just wasn't sure. Like your decisions are yours. So I do enjoy that sort of tone, the themes in the film. I don't know.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts, was that initial scene, and I even wrote down some quotes. He basically says, holiness is in right action.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And when you stand before God, you cannot say, but I was told to, or virtue was inconvenient. Yeah. I really did appreciate that. And that was set a good, that I like that Orlando Bloom was this knight that was actually trying to be a good knight.
Yeah, and so that was kind of his journey, is just sort of being called upon by some divine force, some narrative force that put him in a situation where he ended up having to lead people. And in that position of power, what did he do with the power? He chose to cultivate the land, and he chose to protect the people, the peasants, and to elevate everyone to the status of nobility as much as he could, which is interesting given like the consensus with the elite historically to abuse power, so it's kind of about that struggle. It's like
now there was Scylla at one point, she was like, the rules, those are for the other people, not for us.
Yeah, she says that once, and then in the end she shows her true colors and says, like, what is it? When this is over, there will come a time when you wish you will have done a little evil to do a greater good. And then I think the greater good from
exactly. And then that was like the temptation of Christ, right? Like, and he was like, no,
totally. And that's I like my man Mr. Scott for that kind of stuff, right? It is a kingdom of conscience or nothing. That's not a bad line either. So these sort of hard lines of like, governance is only allowable by way of altruism, like of the person having. Because we're not talking about like we didn't have electricity and guns and things like that to protect ourselves, so we needed some sort of structure. And so basically it says that the more power you have, the more you're obligated to have a higher standard, which is again the concept of chivalry, right? Is
like
to have,
that's like the Knight's Code, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it was codified over so many years, right? But that's all based on this idea that, like, forgiveness is divine, and creating the best situation for people, and having rules that apply to everybody and not just some people, of content.
Now, if we get into some of the motivations of the characters themselves, or just the motivations within the time and the events that were occurring, the Pope had called for a crusade to reclaim the Holy Land by claiming that we needed to go take it, and that killing the infidels was not murder, and it would be your path to absolution of your sins. And if you die in that battle, then you end up in the kingdom of heaven. I think that's where the title comes from. So in essence, they're dehumanizing the enemy, and they believe that they are on a mission from God, like Blues Brothers style, that they can't fail. And I think that's where the cartoonish villains, they're Knights Templar, right? They are.
The Knights Templar are basically James Bond villain, or they're basically Spectre at that point, right?
Right. And they're like religious zealots. Like they believe so wholeheartedly in this divine thing that they're doing, even though it's a great evil that they're doing, but they've convinced themselves that they're doing a great thing. Robert, we've talked about this many times. Many people who commit horrific acts say they're doing it for the good of the people, or they have to justify to their own selves to be able to go through with what they're doing, even if it is a great evil. So I kind of buy into them being cartoonish villains, and even trying to poke the bear and pick a fight with the Muslims, because they had defeated them 80 or 90 years previously and had held them off for that period of time. They thought that they had some divine power that was not going to allow them to lose. And so that's why they got cocky and disregarded the tactical advice that you were talking about earlier. Bring the enemy to you or to where you want to fight them. Make sure that you have your supply lines and your water and all those things that you need. They just threw all that caution to the wind. And the cross that they were carrying around, I guess, in the real Crusades, in this real battle of, was it called Hataka? Like that plateau where they marched out to fight Saladin and ended up getting slaughtered. They had a piece of the actual cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on, and they were treating it Indiana Jones Nazi style, as if this divine object had some superpower that was going to prevent them from losing no matter what they did. So it's almost like, as cars have gotten more and more safety devices in them, the occupants feel like they're at less risk of injury. And so as much as you keep the occupants more safe, it causes people to drive more recklessly. And so people outside the cars, like pedestrians and whatnot, are at greater risk. I think I've seen numbers on that. So like the safer you feel driving, the less careful you will be to drive. Similar to if you think you have not only this mission from God, but then this divine artifact with you that will not permit you to lose, then you're going to be a lot less careful about the decisions you make.
Fair enough. I guess they could also count on the presence of the piece of the cross to inspire, right? Like,
well,
everything you said would also create that kind of motivation, in that, like you said, the right feeling that there wouldn't be like morale issues, right? And a lot of times in medieval battles, it was fairly even space. Like there's only, most of all the fighting happens along on the front, right? Where the two armies are colliding. And so you really only have a small portions of the army that are actually engaged in lethal combat. I mean, you've got some archers back and forth. You got shields to kind of negate that. You might take some casualties, but the real main killing is right at the front. And everybody else behind is like, well, we're okay. And then you can kind of cycle guys back and forth. And you can actually fight for like hours and hours. And these medieval battles would just go on and on and on.
All day.
And not really, doing killing the death blow until one of the other army, their morale broke. And they were like, fuck this shit, we're out. And then they turned tail and ran. And then the slaughter begins. And so I could see the value in having this relic along with you, inspiring everybody like, no, we can't lose. No matter how bad it looks, guys, we're going to win this. So don't even worry about it. I would probably, if I was a religious army of the Christians back in those days, I'd carry that shit with me all the time.
Yeah. Trust the plan.
I'd also worry about water and, supply lines, but I would still have those relics to kind of inspire everybody, because you do not want to suffer a morale defeat. That is when you lose big time.
Right. And then,
and that's two again, right?
Go ahead, Mike. I was going to take us.
Well, you can't. I mean, you were talking about Sun Tzu, right? You can't, like, one of the, I can't remember what they're called. There's some, like the different, I don't know, the pages or something at the beginning. Right? It has a list, and one of the things is morale. Like, if you don't have the people behind a war, you need to like fly a plane into a building or something to get everybody on board with the war, or have Pearl Harbor, Gulf of Tonkin, right? That's a really great example. No one would dispute that one. You got to get the people behind it, and then on top of that, the microcosm of that is like Rob said, the battle itself, right? And things get broken over time. What's interesting about this, though, is that both sides have artifacts, these magical narratives that are imbued upon into artifacts. So you got the spear of destiny and the cross and all these things, and that comes out of symbols as well, right? We have flags and banners and standards. Which is funny. I love the word standard because it is the masthead of an army, but it also now contemporarily means like the manner in which you hold yourself to. Thought that was interesting over time, right? But basically, this movie is interesting to me because it has a very stark contrast between the church, the Pope, the motivations of like essentially what are governments, motivating or inscripting people through poverty and whatnot and indoctrination to go wage war for them just for economic reasons, solely for economic reasons, and then the other motivation of leadership, which is spiritual and defensive and protecting. And it's interesting that because the army, like those idiots, they go out and they get themselves slaughtered because they think that they're untouchable. Maybe the Pope blessed them or whatever. And what's interesting is that Orlando Bloom uses the exact same tactic or the exact same sort of rhetorical trick of saying like, no, you're knights. You're all knights now. You're going to fight better. And what's interesting is like good wins over evil in this, essentially, in terms of like a lot of the evil people are punished in this, and a lot of the good people are spared and succeed at their task, and it's by right action, and it's like, does making a man a knight make him a better fighter? And he just like definitively says, yes, it does, because that man has something to believe in, and he has faith behind him. Now, I won't debate whether or not that faith is warranted. I'm just saying that like when somebody is clear of mind, they are much better at succeeding at tasks that are before them.
Yeah, they have purpose.
They don't have all those doubts don't come creeping into their brain in the middle when things get bad.
Yeah. Can I just say one? The reason the bad guys, their artifacts don't work. When the Nazis get the Ark of the Covenant, it doesn't work because there's an evil intention behind it, and I think that at some inherent level or some base level that we understand when somebody's lying to us, at least to an extent. Like we're like, well, I don't know. It's just a piece of the cross, ultimately, right? Like, I'll follow you, but this guy's a fucking idiot, and we don't have any water, and and how can you internally justify the motivation of a forced march versus the motivation of a defensive position? Like one, you can understand one and not the other, like as an animal. Like you don't really need to be an intellectual to understand that like defending yourself is justified and attacking somebody is not always justified. That's my closing statement.
Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Well, I
Like,
just wanted to.
well,
so that's why
like
the bad guys don't their magic doesn't work because it's bad.
Right. Like I didn't really understand like how they were inspiring their soldiers other than this is this crusading holy war. Yeah, money, but like, was there really a lot of plunder to be had when you're facing this massive force? Like, I don't know.
I don't know.
Basically, like plundering trade routes, like was what they were doing before.
Isn't the Muslim jihad thing like 72 virgins? Like if you die, doing jihad
During a holy war,
Yeah, I mean that's the
you're
layman,
prepared.
right? That's the peasant's version of God, It's like, oh, you
Right,
go
but-
up and there'll be like fucking chocolate fountains and you'll get lots of pussy. Like, I guess. I mean, yeah, that motivates a child, right? But I mean, I think as you get older, that's like most men sort of grow past that. So like, you pretty much got to get a guy that doesn't have a dad and put him in school, Muslim school or whatever. Maybe let's not pick on the Muslims, but because you get like indoctrinated people. I mean, the army recruitment centers like just outside of high schools and shit, right? Like outside of malls and stuff, right? It's all poverty.
14 and 15-year-olds, people whose brains have not developed.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. How about, okay, take it right now, right? I mean, I see a divergence of like two possible sort of alternate realities happening right now, where one is people waking up and wanting freedom, and the other is people that will be slaves. And I honestly it's to the point where I think about it in terms of like parallel universes, because like it honestly seems like some people want to follow and be slaves, and other people want to follow with a sense of conscience. And I mean, that's why I like this movie so much, is because it talks a lot about what leadership is in a way that isn't too preachy. It has a lot of depth of character,
Yeah. Now, I do like a lot of what you're saying, and I've had like 10 things I've wanted to say, but then we keep.
Okay. Here, I'm gonna mute my mic right now.
Talk over each other. That's fine. That's what we do here. But what the hell was I going to say? So back to the motivations, and you were just talking about it a little bit here, where I was bringing up the modern day concept of the jihad and the 72 versions, but they're basically doing the same thing on the Christian side back in the Crusades per this movie. And that is one of the things that got Orlando Bloom interested in going at all, was that he had strong beliefs in that his sins and his wife committing suicide being a sin would mean that she was burning in hell. And so he believed that by going to Jerusalem, he was going to absolve not only himself of those sins, but also his wife and save her from hell. So it's one of those like recruitment tools, motivating factors for useful idiots to be pawns into the games of kings and other men playing at a grander scale, the grand chessboard, if you will. And I think Ed Norton's character even mentioned it. Like, will you be a pawn of another man or at the whimsy of a king?
Well,
so
how better to get recruitment than to say you're all sinners and then go, but here's a path to absolve those sins.
Yeah, and also like you're fucking eating maggot-filled
problem
bread.
reaction solution right here, baby.
And we'll give you a chicken to eat. What better story is there than a guy that's lost and then joins essentially the army trying to find absolution in horseshit, and then realizes that that's horseshit, but still gets through that and becomes a great leader. Like, he's essentially the king by the end. So he goes from peasant to king, and through that journey is all of the propaganda, and he just keeps going like, oh, okay, well, now I can see firsthand. And then the core of his being, the righteous, heroic dude that was inside, like, kept making the right decisions, and making the right decisions each time exalted him, which I think is a pretty epic story, right?
So I think that's what you like about it. He's navigating the narrative by staying true to his principles, and he gets past all the propaganda.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
and then there's so much fucking killing.
Liam Neeson gives him some good fatherly advice, which he does at the end of his life. He wasn't there at all for the rest of his life, or his early beginning, but whatever.
He did
But
apologize.
Yeah, he was like, "Sorry about that, my bad." And then and then Orlando Bloom's like, "Thanks, Dad." And then he's like, "Mr. I can be great night guy." What did you guys think of the Christian bishop guy who's like this Weasley guy who was like, "We'll convert to Islam and then we'll ask for forgiveness later," and he was just like this super Weasley Christian leader guy,
Super
who
pragmatic.
Orlando Bloom could like easily see through that this guy's like a piece of shit. Was he a little bit too comic booky for you guys, or did he seem kind of?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of how bishops are, aren't they? I mean, they fuck kids sometimes. So like.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Okay, I just do not like the structure of the church. And before we're done this thing, let's try to get into the Templars at some point too, right? Because like they are comic book villains. But yeah, I mean, it was a bit. It's a movie though, right? Like it's a little over the top. I wouldn't even say it's over the top. It's like he's just a dick. You've met people that are like that though, and you can kind of tell. Talk to somebody for a bit. You're like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure when the chips are down, you would fucking sell me out for an extra food ration. So I'm not going to give you any more information about my lifestyle. Thanks. Like,
but this is a guy like this bishop dude who's in the market of selling religion, right? Like he's got to not only like talk about how great it is, but like live it. And then he's basically turning. He's turning and like saying, "No, it's just a bunch of bullshit. Don't worry about it." And like at the drop of a hat, it seems like he's out of a job after this movie. Wouldn't you think?
No, not at all. They pretend like, I mean, Trump's not going to be out of a job. You can go do some TV shit or something.
To a different parish, and then he'll be fine.
Nixon's doing okay. I'm sure. Is he dead yet? Anyways, like Obama's doing fine. Like Hillary's not in jail. She lost. And the whole movie's about this sort of leadership of the spirit versus totalitarianism of rules. Like all these, you're supposed to do this. You got to cut your wife's head off because she killed herself. It's like, well, I don't know. I don't think Jesus said that. I've read the Gospels, and he doesn't say that once. Cut your girlfriend's head off if she kills herself. He didn't even say not to like fuck before marriage. Like there's like no. So again, this is like the philosophy of what is essentially an extension of Platonistic thinking. Sort of a. I don't want to get into the debate. I might offend somebody on how I view Christianity, but I do very much enjoy the philosophy of Christ. Like the fundamental, the universal ethic of it is the foundation, I think, of liberty and free market systems.
So, Mike, as our resident expert on Christianity, what is the reasoning behind having suicide be this great sin?
Well, I mean, you're giving up God's greatest gift, I guess, I think is the rhetoric. But again, it's like, I mean, a lot of that I think is purely economical. Like you need to motivate people to continue to work. You can't have them giving up on things. You can't have them not having a bunch of kids. You need them to be obedient, good consumers and workers, right? So this is the abuse of this philosophy by, probably at first the Roman state, and then as other states adopted this sort of, I wouldn't say paradigm, maybe a paradigm, but like just basically like the religion, it formed it into a religion, which is essentially just another form of government, right? Telling somebody how their relationship with God should be is just, and then they tax you for it, right? Like that just seems to be like government 1.0, right? And then government is the religion 2.0. So this movie talks a lot about how like, the Pope is essentially just making up rules, and the rules are coming down, and it doesn't matter like what the justification is. The justification is the authority of the state. It's a means of getting people to behave a certain way, and I don't know, sometimes that's maybe justifiable, and like a speed limit, stoplights. stuff like that, right? But when you start getting into like, you need to run your life this way. I can fuck your wife, because I'm a lord, stuff like that. You kind of start going against the grain of what I think, at least what I read from the teachings of Jesus. So
Jesus is talking about the divine right of kings, doesn't he? He's always talking about banging.
he doesn't talk about doesn't talk about mutilating dead bodies. He said, "You live by the sword, you die by the sword." Turn the other cheek. Which is the problem. The only problem I see with Christianity is it can't really defend itself because it can be that can be exploited, right? If you're willing to walk into a cafe with a bomb strapped to your chest, it's very difficult to turn the other cheek. You'll start losing that fight over time. So you need a crusade, and that's how we end up with this conflict, right? And I'm not talking about. Maybe I shouldn't muddle that. I'm gonna sort of sounding like a bit of hate speech, but I actually have no hate for Muslims at all. I have no particular love for that nation, but I do like the idea of like philosophically like Christendom and Islam and like even Buddhism trying to create a standard of behavior that is not enforceable, that is not enforced by anything but shame and that kind of pressure. Because I feel like that's a better solution than armed forces. That kind of went in circles there a bit there. But I did get myself out of the situation, so.
Good enough. Well, I just wanted to bring up, we were talking about the bishop a little bit ago, and he's a very pragmatic person who, you're right, is one of the first who would sell out because he probably didn't really believe in his ideas. And he's a great contrast to the Orlando Bloom's character, who is guided by principle and not pragmatism. Now, I think that's like a minor relationship that we see in the movie, but I think that's kind of the point of that being brought up, because I'm sure he saw the bishop knew the history of Jerusalem, and when the Christians took it 100 years prior, they killed everybody, and so he knew that that was what was likely to happen if they were not going to be able to keep the Muslims out. Who were, sieging the wall. So he was like, well, it's death or be Weasley.
Yeah. He said, you get on a fast horse and get out of a lesser gate. And he's like, well, what about all these people, you asshole? And he's like, oh, I don't know.
He's a bishop.
God wills it. God wills it.
What's he got to be afraid of?
Yeah, right. Or he doesn't.
If he's led a righteous life. And that's my point. Is like, so these like, it's when you start getting into rules and laws and things like that. And it's like, even at the beginning of the movie where they come to get him for murder, right? And it's like, okay, that's righteous. But, I mean, who's enforcing it? And how are you going to enforce it? And what does that even mean? Like, what kind of trial would you have? Like, why would I give myself up to you? And then you get into the prisoner's dilemma, right? And I would go further, like, whether you're guilty or not, you have every right to try to get out of prison, killing anybody in your path. Like until they put you in the ground, you're a human being that wants to live. So like the idea that you would be motivated to like lay down and die over that. So what's interesting about this is you get this sort of like nice balance in the film about turning the other cheek and having a righteous path and like doing the right thing, but not just giving up or letting people like fist you, Yeah.
Like, Orlando Bloom's character at the beginning was turning.
Had him going.
He was turning the other cheek for a long time with that priest guy who was prodding him. And in the theatrical cut, it's not revealed that he's his brother or half brother, but in the director's cut, it is. So there's even more of a dynamic to the relationship.
Cain and Abel vibe of some kind.
Yeah. And also, there's like some history there. And, he had cut off the wife's head after she was dead and then started talking shit about her and had stolen her necklace. And that was what pushed Orlando Bloom's character over the edge. But up until that point, he was turning the other cheek. He was not responding to the provocations of that half brother who was trying to pick a fight with him, flick his nose, punch him in the face. The John Lennon quote, once they get you violent, they know how to deal with you. But if you don't do that, then they're not sure what to do. So that's kind of what I was reading into that. Like Orlando Bloom, even without being a developed character just yet in the film, he already was displaying those principles, but he also showed that there was a line beyond which, once pushed, he would he would respond to it.
Yeah, and what did you think of that? What did you think that killing was justified, Daniel? Do you think he was a murderer?
I think he was a murderer. I mean, I'd have to rewatch the scene again, but it sure seemed like he didn't necessarily need to stab him with a hot sword and throw him into a fire for his stealing his wife's necklace.
Well, he's grave robbing though.
Cutting her dead head off.
That is a motivator. I mean, Buddy was on the edge, and he was trying to get him to fight back. He kept, smacking him around, saying like, "You need to defend yourself." And so that's another sort of like, I love how the beginning of this movie and the end of this movie bookend the journey. Like, there's a lot of symmetry, right? Where he knights him, gives him the lines, he says the lines to all the people at the end. A lot of, like, in watching this sort of the fourth time or whatever, I'm paying really attention, or I'm really paying attention to the dialogue between those two. And he's saying all sorts of stuff that comes up later on, right? That sort of starts this journey.
You talking about him and Godfrey?
No, him and his brother.
Oh, okay. I feel like this is a movie that if you watch it a few times, you get much more out of it.
Yeah, no, I can't believe you haven't seen this one. Like, this kind of came out when you probably had disposable income and enough time to watch a 3-hour movie. So it's kind of weird you didn't see this one.
No, this was panned. This piece of shit was panned by everybody, and people avoided it like the plague.
I just looked it up. It's 20th Century Fox, and I love Fox because they'll print anything, but you don't have any control over it. So they made like Space Above and Beyond, and they made Firefly, and they gave The Simpsons a shot, and like they'll do anything, but then they control it, and they chop it up, and they fuck with it, and they put spin on it. They'll print any news article too. Like, so the CNN just omits shit, and Fox just prints things and spins the hell out of it. It's kind of interesting that they're different kind of approaches to the machine. But yeah, no, they're on the list now for sure. After cutting this down 45 minutes, that's a grave sin. I think they should have their heads cut off in Minecraft.
Yeah, I think
mine spelled MEIN.
They'll have to go to Jerusalem, fight a holy war.
I think the Ridley Scott interview, he was saying that they cut the hell out of this because of the test screenings or focus groups or whatever, and he was like, maybe that's an okay thing to do for like an unproven director, but once you've kind of earned your stripes,
he didn't negotiate properly.
Then you shouldn't have to be subjected to that.
Kubrick negotiated himself into an early grave by having Final Cut on Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah. Once you're a established director, you can negotiate. For Final Cut, you don't take as big.
They basically would have to kill you to cut 14 minutes out of your final film if they wanted to change it.
Yeah, I mean, you pay for that. Like,
he paid fucking dearly.
But
note to self: don't make a movie about the elite pedophiles that run the world.
Are you saying there could be some negative consequences, Mike?
Yeah, I don't know. He's probably in heaven if there is one. I'm not really sure I even agree to that, but I do agree on righteous behavior, and this is all we have, so we might as well act as though we have autonomy, agency, and there is ultimately a choice that you can feel as soon as you make it. That too heavy?
No, that's right on line with this movie. You are
Let's talk about the next
Bloom.
So, Robert, I want to go to you because you usually have opinions on such things as the acting. You've already said that you found the acting to be good in this film. Did you buy Orlando Bloom as a warrior lead actor? I couldn't really. He felt like a little empty there. Like he wasn't quite leading man material for me. Like I just kept seeing Legolas, and he's fine.
Yeah. Shame.
No. Daniel's right. Daniel's right. He's Orlando. There's a reason why Orlando Bloom is not the leading man macho dude. He's a little bit too much beta. He just doesn't have the body mass and the charisma to be that leading man guy. I mean, yeah, sure, he's good looking enough, but he's more like some kind of runway model type looking dude, like thin and,
I heard he gained 20 pounds for this role.
He was stacked.
Yeah, he had to. I mean, he had a little bit of upper body muscle, but he just doesn't have that alpha
Long
vibe
swords are
to the
heavy.
guy.
Long swords are very heavy. If you've ever held one, they're not like I'm like, okay, I can do this for 20 minutes in
Oh,
a
yeah.
controlled environment, but I'm not fucking doing this for real ever. They did pretty well with the choreography. They could have done better to make it more sort of technically driven, where he's overcoming the brute force with, you know, the way of the intercepting fist. So I think they did well to illustrate that, and then they did a very good job, or he did a very good job. Ridley Scott, I mean, talking or visually describing his other skill set. So they showed him fighting, but they only showed him fighting sometimes. A lot of the time, he was, you know, like motivating and running things, and he was an engineer and stuff. So
Planning things, yeah.
I buy his size. I mean, yeah, he could be probably 6 inches taller and maybe a bit wider, but you know, I can believe it. Maybe because I'm not huge and I want to believe it, but I totally see what you're saying. They could have done better with the choreography, where he just kind of like is a bit more spinny and movie.
Yeah, he could have been a little more acrobatic-y, and then you would have bought that his agility was making up for his lack of size. And
Like if he slid down the stairs while firing an arrow at rapid fire and taking out jihadists.
Yeah, I just don't buy that this, you know, 170-pound guy is going to be able to swing this broadsword and not just get his shit mixed by some 250-pound guy who just meets his sword in the middle, and he's just gonna, anyway.
Yeah, and it's not even like I was watching this thinking he's small. I didn't think that. It's just he didn't have that I don't know, that intangible je ne sais quoi. You know, like there was just something not there.
Because it isn't like you can be pretty and tough too, right? Like I think in the past the tough guys were actually quite pretty still.
Yeah.
Oh, you can be terrifying. You can be a pretty little femboy and be absolutely terrifying if you are super quick and you guys ever see knives or any kinds of little weapons. But
did you guys ever see 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas? Right. So they do. It's basically Beowulf. But they immediately he's with Vikings. He's not going to keep up with Vikings, so he makes himself a smaller sword. And they laugh at him. Oh, it's a woman's sword or whatever, right? But then it justifies him being able to move faster, you know, and sort of keep up with a bunch of Vikings, right? Which are, you know, very brute force kind of techniques. So
yeah, you don't want to cram a square peg into a round hole. You want to get the weapon that's right for you. It just makes sense.
So
but it needed to be the long sword because that's the it's part of the whole knight thing, right?
Yeah.
That's fine, but then you have to hire a bunch of people opposite of him that are his size or smaller. You can't have these giant brutes that.
Oh, and they could have smaller sets. They could like shrink the set down by like 5%, so he looks bigger. Yeah, that's
style.
Okay, you know, I'm gonna write a letter to Ridley Scott right now and tell him it's a total fuck up.
Get with Peter Jackson; he'll show you some techniques to make people look bigger.
Or the guys from Spinal Tap who did the Stonehenge.
I don't know. I don't hate the casting though. Like I like his acting in it, and I like how he portrays the role very well, like as a leader, like a spiritual leader and a guy that's, you know, doing stuff. So the beta aspects kind of work for me, but I totally see, it's like but I don't know, by the time I'm in it, I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm happy that he's like bashing that guy in the head with a rock. I believe it, you know?
Well, here's another thing that kind of I don't quite get, and I know that it's intentional, but they celebrate him as a hero after he rides out to meet Saladin's army in front of Karak. But he gets his ass handed to him. And he's only spared because he was nice to the Sultan guy who he thought was the servant of the other guy. And then later on, when he fortifies the castle and tries to fortifies Jerusalem and tries to save it and fends off Saladin for a while and threatens to destroy the city rather than give it to him. I think that was like his only card he had left to play.
I like how fucking hard.
He's celebrated as a hero in all these instances for losing.
No, he won. He won the safety of the people inside. The king lost that fight.
He won the people, but When he came back after surrendering Jerusalem, and there was that moment where everybody was clapping him on the back and like cheering him on and stuff. That
They didn't have to die.
That scene rang hollow to me.
Okay.
I don't think that all those people would have been like, yeah, like they just scored a touchdown or something. Yes, they get to walk out of there with their lives for the most part if you trust Saladin, but I don't know, man. It just didn't feel like a victory.
Yeah, maybe not cheering, but I think that was a victory. It was obviously a moral victory.
Yeah. Well, and
the situation was everybody in there was slaughtered, where the knights defend the women and children. So
I completely agree with you on that aspect. It just,
I mean, maybe you're not going to get cheering, but you're also not going to get a swell of violins and horns. You know, like it's a story. So I'm like, okay.
I get it. That's
it'd be more like, oh, we don't have to die, guys, and it'd be like, awesome, I'm going to sleep. Like,
yeah, but yeah, you're right.
Just wake me up when I have to leave the city, please.
It was weird that it was like the flight deck in Top Gun after Tom Cruise lands the plane. You know, like yeah, you know, like everything's cool again. And then after the Battle of Karak, where he gets his ass handed to him, I get that his motivation was to protect the villagers or whatever, like the peasants, but I guess it didn't come through in the movie. Like, it seems like the peasants should have been heading towards the castle, and then Orlando Bloom's like protecting them, but it didn't seem as if there was that connection there of that actually happening. Like, they talk about it happening, but it doesn't really seem to happen. And then Orlando Bloom's force gets overwhelmed and spared, but then Orlando Bloom's a hero. So that kind of was a misconnect for me too.
Yeah, I guess show don't tell, because he does say it, but visually it's hard to convey.
They didn't show a bunch of peasants being able to make it to Karak because of his action.
You want to take an extra 90 seconds for a movie that's 3 hours and 14 minutes long already? Like, I think that when you get down to it, you start cutting like 10 seconds at a time, trying to convey I can identify if I like with my music and shit. I'm like, okay, how fast can I convey this? Like, I got a piece at the final climax is like an hour and 40 minutes long, and like, well, not everybody's gonna want to listen to an hour and 40 minutes of like really good music coupled with other stuff, and you're like, okay, well, how do we get from here to here, and what needs to happen, right? So
see, that's another one of my criticisms is I feel like there is more that needed to be in this movie to make it make even more sense.
I wish he wasn't over the hill. I wish he could go back in time and make miniseries, but with like $1 billion for 10 episodes. You know what I mean? Like, here's 10 hours to talk about whatever you want. You have final cut, but at his heyday, because he's a bit over the hill, right? I don't think he's worth his salt, but I wouldn't give him extra salt.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, like, you know, how do I get from here to here? Like the transitions, like a lot of the transitions from scene to scene in this movie feel like they're not quite, I don't know, transition-y enough. They're just kind of like
Gladiator.
Boom. Yeah, it's like boom, you're over here all of a sudden. You know, like he gets out of Jerusalem, and then all of a sudden we're looking at him in his village in France.
Yeah, it's like you want to
establishing like, okay, we're not in Jerusalem anymore. Now we're in France. It's just like boom, you're there.
Like you want to take Edgar Wright's editing and put it on Ridley Scott's film.
No.
Oh, could you imagine if her face was on her body? It's like, oh, okay. I mean, the guy's got his faults. He's not my favorite director, but man, does he spin a yarn? At least back in the day. I even liked Robin Hood to an extent. I mean, it's not a great film, but
that's the Russell Crowe one.
Yeah, I liked it. I didn't hate it. It gets pretty dumb at the end. I usually just kind of stop watching it about 90% of the film. When like they're like going to war with France. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Go back to Robin Hood.
So I have one final note on my side, and then we can do some more final notes on your guys' side. In watching this movie, it reminded me of a game I had on my Nintendo DS like 10 years ago called Age of Empires.
Fuck yes.
And it's like a fun game. It has Saladin. It had King Richard Lionheart and like a French character and some other ones. And you had like different types of infantry and ballistas and siege weapons and all of these things. And you would try to either attack or defend on each of these levels and go through the various campaigns. Now I kind of have hankering to like try to find that thing.
Dude, you
And
just get
there's
the
no
new
emulator?
definitive edition. There's a new Age of Empires 2 definitive edition. You can get it on Steam. You can find it even on sale for like $10 or something. And
Yeah,
supposedly it's really good.
It's got like the old Tecmo Bowl style graphics, right?
I like it.
No,
I like this
It's
idea
all
of
pretty now. It's all pretty now.
I'm all about hiding in the things I used to like and just pretending all of this shit's not going on. I'm playing old video games, listening to old music, watching old movies.
Living
It's great.
the good old days.
And I got government sponsorship now, so I don't even have to worry about it. Then just focusing on my propaganda. Do I have time to talk about the Knights Templar real quick?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you know how like some hotels are named Arms, like the Alec Arms and the whatever Arms. You ever seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all ever seen that? So that's named for the lodging houses of the Knights Templar. It come through. It's Arms, right? It's a hotel that's essentially owned by them, and eventually from there they ended up with ledgers and coffers that would extend across nations. So essentially, they became the first international banks, which is interesting because they're like a sort of Satanistic, blasphemic infiltration of the church. Not that the Roman Empire, the Catholic Empire, was particularly altruistic or not corrupt. Like I think that from day one, like it was kind of a corrupt agency. But this is like sort of a subset of that, which was a very corrupt organization. And then you get the Friday the 13th is when like they were all arrested in France. Gotta look that up. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think a
they
bunch
were
of them
all
were executed.
Yeah, and then like 400 years later, Notre Dame was burned down, right? So it's like it's interesting to me that like the negative motivations and the bloodlust and the desire for war for sort of economic reasons correlates to organizations that have like ledgers across nations and an invested interest in like having an army go out and pillage and corrupting the like the spiritual order of things, like the organizations that we form to try to have a community and spirituality. These sort of people come in and they corrupt it, and they'll say anything, right? Like they're like, oh yeah, I'm totally Christian and I got a big cross on my chest, and like I'm totally for Jesus, so I'm just gonna go fucking slaughter a caravan of helpless people. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that they're essentially the first international banks.
We're owned by the banks.
Thanks, Knights Templar.
Yeah, I don't know. Weren't they the bad guys in Assassin's Creed as well?
Probably. I don't know. The movie?
Well, no, the
video game
158 game series.
Yeah, I don't know which one you're talking about. So
I think they're gonna quit when they get to 666, probably. I don't know. I don't know. Fucking
Last Crusade, was that guy a Knights Templar? The guy protecting the Holy Grail?
Yeah, but Spielberg is kind of a propagandist, right? Like he likes to, I don't know. The Knights Templar were like, but again, it's like I don't know. Spielberg and Lucas with those films kind of told a fairly fanciful yarn. I don't take too much, you know. There's not a lot of
accuracy in that.
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, they're just kind of I think they're just name dropping at that point. I don't know if they were really too interested in actually being accurate in any way. I don't know.
Okay. So
they're like, who's the bad guys in this? I don't know. Nazis. We all hate Nazis, right? No one's gonna fuck this up.
All right, Robert. Let's go to you for your final comments, and then slide right into final summary and review, if you would.
Sure. Let me take a look here at these notes. Yeah, no, we've gone over all my notes. I took very few notes. I was just kind of enjoying the film. I like how the main character is a builder, and from like an economic standpoint, he kind of sees it as his duty as the owner of this like estate to improve the land. And he digs for water, and he irrigates a whole bunch of crops where before there were none. And he really saw it as, what do you do with land? Well, you make it better. You improve it. You homestead it. So that, from my political philosophy standpoint, that's right on to what you should be doing. And then the villains are plunderers. They are people who steal the wealth from others and then call themselves, lords and kings and whatnots. And they're just the scum of the earth. These are the leeches, the parasites, where what you want to be doing is building and growing and making the land and using the land to enrich everybody and improving the land. So that was a fun perspective. I enjoyed having the
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, Robert might be frozen, so if you could leave and come back, Robert, and we'll go to Mike for your final sermon review, and give me a number of, I don't know. Is there a number of anything in this that we can use for a rating?
I don't like that kind of metric, to be honest. I think I've displayed that by completely throwing it out the window every time I'm on the show. I don't know. I give it 8 Hail Marys out of 7. I think Rob was doing a pretty good job articulating a lot of the ideas. Like I said, it talks a lot about spiritual leadership and the dichotomy that he said about plundering versus cultivating. I think is a central theme to the show, and it doesn't hit you over the head with it. They tell a lot of that stuff visually. For any lacking in the visual narrative, there's just a sheer, there's a volume of information to get across. So sometimes they have to make some cuts, but pretty solid. I mean, yeah, maybe it's not Gladiator, but there's not going to be a lot of films like Gladiator. I think in his heyday, Ridley Scott told a really great tale, and this one in particular just makes me think about the ideas that sort of Western culture is sort of cultivated, and this dichotomy between looting and pillaging and taking and extracting through force, taxes, and how we've refined that process over the centuries, through manipulation, versus the kind of person that just takes a stand and tries to cultivate a future, and then the idea of leadership being how well do you allow others to succeed? How well do you, instill the courage in people and the incentive and motivation to do right by themselves and the people around them? I don't know. I'm pretty impressed watching this the 4th or 5th time now. And what's interesting is it's a movie that when I was younger, I liked it, but I didn't really get, some of the nuances of it. And then you get more and more into it and you're like, oh shit, this character is an angel. And he's literally waiting for an actual God, and stuff like that. So you get end up with a yarn that's kind of, a little more fanciful, which I tend to like. I don't know. Yeah. 8 out of 7.
So more than the total.
Break the bank, so to speak.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think Robert, who was gloating about his high-speed internet coming to his community earlier in the pre-show, has lost.
It's coming on horse right now.
Yeah, he's lost his internet access. So I think he was going to give it a pretty good score. And I noticed a lot of the same things that he was mentioning in that the character of Balian, he's kind of an all-around good dude, principled guy, and he's actually trying to improve things, not only for himself, but for the people around him. He's trying to lift them up or inspire. I really did like, that scene at the end where he knights all of these people, and it comes through in the movie, all of those actors, you can see right before he knights them to right after, they actually look uplifted and more you know, like they're ready to face the tremendous odds before them. So overall, I think it's a really good movie. I do think it actually could be longer, and it could be maybe polished just a little bit more. So you sort of have like these establishing scenes. So you can kind of understand where you are in relation to, you know, geographically or time, because there are a lot of kind of complicated things sort of going on in this movie. So it's a bit of a muddled mess at first, but I think upon subsequent viewings, it would become easier to understand, and perhaps a lot of that nuance would come out. So I can only imagine how the theatrical cut, which cut out a lot of like the motivating factors, would have been harder to watch, because then it really does just seem even more muddled because you have less reason for these things happening. One of the big things that in my just initial watching that kind of bothered me was just, it just so happens that his wife had just killed herself, and it just so happens that his dad shows up out of the blue on the same day or the next day. It's just like, okay, yeah, I get it. You're telling a story or whatever, but it just seems like such coincidence to get the ball rolling. Like it almost seemed as if Liam Neeson's character had this he had this purpose in going and reconnecting with his son, and his son was going to be the chosen one to like do some great deed. But that never pays off. We never get like why he thought that, like why he went to go get Balian and why it was so necessary for him to do so.
Fair enough.
So anyway, but still a good movie, and I'm glad that you brought it up. And if I ever get a solid 3.5 hour block of time where I'm not like cramming to watch another movie for us to do a show on, I will maybe throw this on and try to watch it again. I also have noticed since watching the movie that in the draft cuts of your upcoming album of Mechanical Dream Revolution, episode 5 is what it is, or season 5.
Yeah, this is season 3.
Oh, okay, you're on season 3. So
this is it. I'm gonna do something else after this. I mean, I'll do more music, but I'm fucking done with this. Like, this is it.
Well, my point I was trying to get to is I noticed you use some of the lines from this here movie in at least one or more tracks.
Yes.
On the new stuff. So that finally clicked for me. I do really enjoy your stuff and the cultural references that you throw into it. And that's one of the things that I think helps to tell the narrative that you're trying to tell. But some of them I am not familiar with. And so that, I think, means that perhaps your listener needs to sort of be aware of these things to get the point.
I mean, sorry, yes and no. Like, so I've had that feedback, and I've had feedback like the opposite as well. Like, it didn't matter. Like, you don't have to see the movie Soldier, right? Yeah, I don't know if you've seen
lines.
it.
Right, yeah.
Well, and you get those lines, you're like, fuck yeah, right? Is that what a crazy motherfucker. He's gonna go kill, you know. And so what's interesting is that it's sort of, I mean, that's true. Like, for some of the stuff, if it's really a bit of nostalgia baiting, then you will have had to seen it. But like, I'm also trying to say something with the things I'm choosing, and I think they stand on their own for the most part. So if I get that wrong sometimes, you know, maybe that's the case. But I guess, you know, it's improved, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, yeah, I think you hit more than you miss for sure.
Well, I don't think it's necessary. Like, I think that like a line from Reign of Fire with Christian Bale and an absolutely jacked up McConaughey, you know, there's a couple of decent lines in that movie that if I just played you the scene, you'd be like, yeah, that guy's fucking awesome, right?
Right, yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah. And so it's like, I mean, I try to make sure that I'm articulating enough with just what it's saying without it being contextual, because I'm recontextualizing it. And then ideally, it's also improved and resonates if you've seen the material, and I'm reappropriating it at that point.
Right. So there's a whole nother level if someone is familiar with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I hope it rings true regardless.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. By the way, I didn't give it a score. I'm going to go with the 7.5, 7.5 Knights Templars. So one without a head.
Thanks. Yeah. They should all have no heads.
All right.
We should make them rebuild that fucking Notre Dame. that they totally burnt down.
That was like a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's going to be our show for tonight. So, Mike, people can find the song that you're going to be sharing with us at lastnighters.com/155. You can also find this episode on the Liberty Movement's YouTube channel. And you can support the show over at lastnighters.com/Patreon, get pre-show and post-show bonus content. We call the post-show content Kathleen turned to overdrive after the band name the Jack Black said in High Fidelity, which is a lot of fun. Good movie. We did that a couple of months ago, or about a year ago now, I think. But it's been a while. But I just want to say next week we're going to be having Snobby Bobby back on from the Not For Everyone podcast. I Patreon to him, and he Patreons to me. We do a Patreonic circle jerk, so it works out. He sends some money my way. I send the same amount back to him, and the government gets a cut. It's great. It's perfect. But so he's going to be on for Contact, the Matthew McConaughey movie, speaking of him, because the dish telescope at Arecibo collapsed recently, and it's featured prominently in this film. And so that's why I wanted to do it in a timely manner. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. And Snobby Bobby is, of course, a man, a big fan of Bigfoot and all things conspiracy. So we'll have plenty to talk about on that episode. So I want to wish you guys all a Merry Christmas. This is our Christmas episode. Nothing says Christmas like Legolas defending Jerusalem and the Battle of Helm's Deep 2, as we said in the open. So we'll see you guys all next week. And with that, I'll say Merry Christmas and good night from last night, everyone. Peace out.